Okay, good morning. How are you?
Good afternoon from here, Vasilis. I'm doing well, and I would like to congratulate you for becoming a great YouTuber. And we can see you all the time becoming a celebrity day by day.
Oh
So
my
that's
God.
great. I'm doing good, and now you have pulled me also to become a celebrity with you.
Oh
So I'm
yes.
enjoying.
Let's
I'm
share the
enjoying
fame,
it.
right?
Yeah, so I'm enjoying actually, and yeah, I'm doing good. And what about today? What we are going to talk today?
Today we will be discussing about assessment in PYP.
All
I think that
right.
assessment is something which is very different in the PYP in comparison to
Yes.
other national curriculums or A levels, AGC,
Yeah.
IGCSE, sorry. And we have many teachers that are confused regarding about how to assess students in PYP. But they have, like, we have to start understanding what the assessment is in the PYP, because if we don't start from the basics, then we cannot unfold it and upgrade it. um,
Yes.
so what do you think assessment is in PYP?
So I would like to say that when we are changing the way of teaching, we need to change the way of assessing. And that's what PYP is all about. So when we talk about PYP, so PYP assessments are almost, data informed, not data driven. So it means that we don't rely on the data driven assessment, rather we use assessment as a form to inform ourselves. So inform our teaching and learning practices, or as far as enhanced PYP, inform our learning and teaching practices basically. And all the PYP assessments are meant for learners, learning community, and learning and teaching. So, assessment has a vital role in PYP, and it is not merely a measuring criteria or labeling students, rather, it has a very vital purpose. So, we actually use assessment data to inform our learning and teaching practices. And as you said right now, that teachers are confused. So earlier, only we had making the PYP happen, and there are two, three, I think hardly 4 pages about assessment, and things were abstract. But when we see PRC has good resources, and it tells us about, like, why are we assessing, how are we assessing, and what do we assess. So PRC is a good resource. So all the PYP teachers, those who are using, enhanced PYP, they need to go to PRC and have a look at what all, treasured material is there to understand basically the process of assessments.
Mhm. I really like that you mentioned the purpose of the assessment, because
Yeah.
the purpose of the assessment is totally different from the other schools that we have been mentioning, because we have the assessment for learning. And
Yes.
it's not like we had this discrimination between assessment of learning and assessment for learning. But now, what do we have with the PYP enhancements? Like, how did this change now?
All right. So PYP enhancement talks about integrated assessments, right? So when we
Hmm.
see that circular, the colorful blue diagram, so it tells us about that what is assessment and actually like what it meant for. So it says that assessment are for the learners, for the learning community, and for learning and teachings. And what do we assess? It tells us about, what is the purpose of assessment? Why do we assess? How do we assess? So what do we assess? We assess knowledge, conceptual understanding, and skills
Hmm.
that we call, ATLs, the transferable skills. So we assess that. And then how do we assess? We assess through monitoring. We document the learning process, right? And then we report. And earlier, how it was reporting, recording, assessing. But when we see it now, it is more of monitoring. So that tells us the very nature, as I said, that we are a curriculum or a philosophy which is, not data driven. We are data informed. So we are becoming more informed by using, all this 21st century way of assessing students,
Hmm.
because these students are really different. They are not the passive learners, they are the active contributors. And IB realized it, and the new enhancement talks about it. So we are actually forward looking.
How do we as teachers assess students of different ages in different subjects in PYP?
All right, so let's discuss more about, what are the types of assessments do we have in PYP? So PYP assessments have, basically if we categorize the PYP assessments, it's formative assessments and the summative assessment. So formative assessments have a dual role when it says, there's a different purpose of two basic type of formative assessment as learning and assessment for learning. So PYP is inquiry based and a concept driven curriculum. So this design of assessment actually supports this kind of learning. So when we say formative assessment, so I always use this analogy, and this is one of my favorite as well, that if when we see a student as a plant. So for see for say for students yeah, are plants, and like what will be our major focus? So when we plant the seed, a major focus will be like how they're growing and what do they need to grow. So that is all about formative assessment. And because we are gardeners and we need to know how much they have grown up, so we will measure it, and that happens after interval where we are what should I say, where we are, where we can see that we have done a lot of work on their growth and now it's time to measure. So that's where the summative assessment came into scene. So summative assessment is assessment of learning, and that happens at the end of the concept or the end of the unit of inquiry, where we want a culminating result. And assessment for learning is actually ongoing in nature, and it is a part and parcel of our day-to-day life. So we assess formally, we assess informally. Yes, we have some formative assessment plan, and there are some formative assessment which evolve as we learn and teach. So when we basically talk about assessment as learning, so it's about learning about learning, lot of meta learning, and students are involved in it. And the focus is more on self regulation, that how am I learning, what am I learning, what skills I'm developing, and what are the things which I need to develop to reach the learning intention or the learning outcome. So this is where assessment make learners more agentic, and we are talking a lot about student agency, and we can
Mhm.
see student agency when they are actively involved in the assessment as a contributor, not as a passive learner. So this is the beauty of PYP, where learners are co-constructing the learning and co-constructing the assessment success criteria, and they are part of their learning intention. It's not like one fine day teacher is telling, okay, we need to learn this, and this is how you're learning, and now there is a test. It's not like that.
No, no,
they
no.
learn
Yeah.
they learn about learning, like this is how. So what is again something very beautiful, that product is important in PYP, yes, but the process is equally valued, because the inquiry itself talks about a cyclic process. Inquiry is cyclic in nature. So how did they start, where they were, where they are reaching, what are the resources do they need, how they are gathering and analyzing the data. So each step is important. That is the reason in the enhanced PYP, when we talk about stages of assessment, then monitoring and documenting are more important than measuring and reporting, right? We want to report,
Exactly. Yep.
but we need to be data informed. So this is what we are doing in assessment as learning. And the major shift that has happened from self assessment, right? I'm self assessing myself, tick 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 tick, I'm good at this, this is what has happened. But what am I going to do next? This was not there in the last PYP model, right? There was teachers like me, we used to have lot many self assessment, but that self assessment, once it is done, we never used to use it as a tool to self regulate. And in the enhanced PYP, it is quite explicit. So the focus has shifted from self-assessment to self-regulation, and there are a lot many easy strategies that we are using. For example, as a teacher I use these strategies, but yes, as a pedagogical leader, because now the remote learning is happening and teachers have those 40 minutes where they want to students self-assess themselves. So we are using very simple strategies, like the traffic lights. So students are self assessing themselves, that yes, they are in the red mode of traffic light, and there are things which very difficult for them to understand. They say no, we are all clear, we are in the green mode because we understand things explicitly, and this is how it is. We are in the yellow mode, that we understood it, and now we need little help. We use success ladder, we use thumbs up and thumbs down, and this is working well in early years, especially those who have those who want to say things in a very easy manner. So this is working well. When it comes to the upper primary, when it comes to grade 1 and 2, we are using lots of thinking routines. So I used to think, and now I am thinking, and there are routines like
Mm.
grow and glow reflection. So what is this? Something very interesting. So grow reflection means here I am growing, these are the areas where I'm growing. I have still not reached my full potential, and this is the area where am I glowing, means I'm doing well in this area. And there's one more which I really like, up and down reflection. So they say that these are the areas of our learning which are which are the areas of improvement. And the up reflection is these are the areas where I'm I have improved and I'm really proud of it. So they are actually talking about their strengths and weaknesses, and then they talk about what are the ways to improve.
Mhm.
So this is how learning is happening, and it is beautiful because learners are involved. And when learners are involved, they learn better. Another thing which is an advantage of assessment as learning, when you're involving learners, so there are less chances of teachers becoming yelling at students, because they themselves know it is a kind of learning contract, an agreement that they know what is being learned. So we are using learning contracts also, and those are beautiful template where they talk about this is what we are learning, this is how we need to learn, and this will be the final outcome. So this is making learning more personalized, not individualized. There's a big difference between personalized learning, and this is how we need to work with the facilitator, or we need to work with our parents. So we are using learning contracts also. So learning contracts is also making learners more self-regulatory. So this is one thing. And then let's talk about assessment for learning. So assessment for learning is again both formal and informal. So formal assessments are where teachers is planning, PYP assessments are both backward by design and forward looking too. So when teachers are planning their assessments, so they basically see these are the end goals. So
Mhm.
these are the big ideas which we call, in different languages we talk about concept based learning, linear Erickson, we call it generalization or the big idea. When we talk in PYP language, those are the central ideas. So teachers first design, they don't ask the question that what content we need to deliver, they ask the question what concept we need to build up along with student. So that is beautiful. So we use the backward designing, and the focus is very different. We teach to transfer, we don't teach to learn to mug up. So those are the big ideas that teachers decide. And then the second most vital question that they ask, that how do we know that my learning is successful or my teaching is successful. Then they talk about the success criteria, they talk about the illicit evidences of learning, and that is where assessment comes into scene. And then they talk about learning experiences. So so assessment is backward by design. Then how is it forward looking? Because there are things which are not planned, we cannot plan those things on paper. And what are those things? Those are soft skills. So basically your learner profile, and now attitude is not a part, but attitude has not gone anywhere, it is very much there, and it is now embedded in learner profile, subsumed in learner profile. So those are the things which happen as a part and parcel of learning. So those things make PYP assessment forward looking. When a learner is realizing that okay, this particular task make me a thinker, and I use my thinking skills because I have synthesized something new. So this is what the learner has realized, is not what the teacher has planned. So
Mhm.
assessment is also forward by design. So assessment in PYP is backward by design and forward looking too. And now let's talk about assessment for learning. So I was talking about that there are some assessment which is actually planned by the teachers, and there are some assessment which happen when we take up the learning in the classroom. For example, a learner is learning about, say they are learning about governmental system, and they have realized that the gathered research is not making sense to them. So what are the next steps? So what is happening? Self-assessment is happening. So he's talking to the teacher that what if I get these resources? So if we have, you know, some kind of guest speaker in the class, or if I use this kind of thinking routine, if I use this strategy, it will be, you know, if I use this concept map. So those kind of assessment, concept mapping, or you know, using the de Bono's thinking act to understand what is happening. So these are the assessment which are, you know, assessment for learning, and
Mhm.
these are more qualitative in nature, and some are, you know, more quantitative, when we have, you know, the rubric criteria discussed and designed along with students. And something which I'm really liking when it comes to co-construct the learning with the student is single point rubric. You must have heard about it.
Yeah, yeah.
So the single point rubric has all the criterias in the middle, and students can see, like, talk about what I wonder and what I wish to do. So they are doing a lot of feedback and feed forward, and they are thinking learning as a process. So single point rubric is a very good tool to co-construct the learning with the students, right? And what teachers are doing at present, they are using single point rubric, and they are also discussing, okay, if this is the particular learning engagement, how will you call it successful? And they are jotting down, you know, using the mind meester, they go, these could be the criteria, success criteria, and then they are refining the criteria, and that criteria is co-constructed. Instead of, you know, teacher delivered, okay, this is the task, these are the criteria, let's finish it up. This is not the approach. So this is assessment for learning. And one thing, like the tools I already discussed, I'll discuss it again. Teacher need to know the purpose of the assessment, and that is, you know, very clear, that we need some quantitative data as well. So for those quantitative data, we need to have formal formative assessment. But actually the formative assessment is more about growth, is more about development, is more about, you know, informing teaching and learning. So we need to have uh, a lot of observation, a lot of what should I say, growth opportunities for the learner. So it should not be seen as an end game. So keep your end game for your summative assessment. And now PYP is moving away from summative assessment as well. So it is not necessary to have a summative assessment. If you don't want, you know, you need not to have a summative assessment. So this is something, you know, beautiful, because we are changing our mindset and our focus is more towards learning. But yes, for some school, some parents, you know, assessment, summative assessment, you know, it value a lot. So it depends upon, you know, school to school, in which context you are. So when we talk about, you know, the summative assessment, what are some characteristics which make it more successful? One thing, it should be open-ended in nature. And second thing, it needs to involve students. And the third thing, it should transfer what has been learned in class during the inquiry to the real world. So if this is happening, yes, the summative assessment is quite successful.
Mhm.
Another aspect that I would like to add on, that, you know, feedback is important, but the new thing that has come up in, you know, PYP is feed forward. So say for example, the students are learning a paragraph, they are learning a paragraph writing, and the teacher is giving the feedback in the end, and the teacher is saying this is wrong, that is right. So how meaningful it is? It is less meaningful. She is telling that this is wrong, this is right, but she is not talking about the next steps. So there came into scene the feed forward. So if along with discussing the shortcomings, we are also finding ways, co-constructing ways to become successful. So learning is viewed as a developmental progress. So feedback is again a very important tool, and it actually, you know, foster this kind of learning. So yes, it is important. And yeah.
Like we need to give students constructive feedback, so
Yes.
they will be, let's say, they will be based on what we give them in order to build up on what they have already built for themselves. So for
Yes.
example, in writing the paragraph that you mentioned, it's good, of course, to say that like you have to start with a capital letter, you have
Yeah.
to have a verb in your sentences. However, it's not only the structure is not only to pinpoint what is wrong, what is right, but also give some initiative to the students to develop their paragraph. So for example, okay, you mentioned that, let's say, Lily went to the forest, and then what happened? So if we give those prompts to the students
Yes.
and try to trigger their interest, trigger their inquisitive spirit, then they will develop for themselves what they have already started doing. So by giving feedback is not only giving the right answer or highlighting the mistakes, but also trying to find a way to elicit around what has to be channeled to the students in order to promote learning, to promote progress.
Very
Was
well said.
yeah.
I would like to add on over here
Hmm.
because, I would like to make it more elaborative. The way you said that feedback is not all about, giving answer. Feedback is about asking good question, because
Exactly.
when, for example, you are seeing that paragraph and you're asking what is missing in it. So the child himself is saying that I think my sentence have not started with the capital letter, and I think there are some punctuations missing. So instead of we telling them, they are telling us that this is something, okay, how can we make it more better? Some details are missing, we can bring in those. So asking them right questions. And there is another perspective for feedback as well, as per John Hattie. So teachers should see assessment as a feedback to their teaching.
Hmm.
Why? Because whatever is happening in the class, if they are going heading in the right direction, it's a teacher. Because this is a research, he did a lot of meta analysis, and it's it's been contradicted by many educationists, but still I can relate with it better, because I have seen, and specifically in PYP schools where we don't have a course book. So it all depends on teacher, how good you are as a teacher and how good you are as a learner. I have shared, many examples of my own learning. So you need to have that growth mindset. So if you are learning how to learn, if you're learning how to teach, how good you are as a student doesn't matter. So all the good students cannot become a good teacher, and all the good, average students, they turn up into a very good teacher.
Yeah.
This is what I have experienced. So yes, take assessment as a feedback of your own, teaching, that how am I going and what is my impact. If that is the one question that we are asking ourselves, that what is my impact. So it is actually, adding more value to the profession. And yes, assessment mindset is important. Assessment. And when teachers are, planning assessment, they need to ask themselves that, yeah, this is where we have started. It's very
Hmm.
important to take prior knowledge. Otherwise, we are wasting either our time or the valuable time of the students, entire class. So, say for example, I'm teaching a very good, great lesson, and I'm very confident about it. And at the end, I achieved great results. But if I did not take prior knowledge, am I sure about it that it is my impact? I have done it. Probably the children, they knew about it, because I can tell you as a mother, as a teacher, as a pedagogical leader, that these children, they know a lot. Because and we need to know what kind of simulation, what kind of provocation we can give them to
Hmm.
activate that prior knowledge. So the focus should be on activating the prior knowledge. And when we are designing the prior knowledge assessment, we need to act as an activator. Are we asking right question? Are we going to give them opportunity to tell us what do they know? And then only we can plan about what they can do, right?
So
So
now this is a
this is
very
an important aspect.
it's a very great opportunity now that you're mentioning this to pinpoint the importance of pre-assessments in
Yes.
every single unit. So what kind of pre-assessments do we have? Like, for example, we have KWHL.
Yes.
We have, which is knowing
Yeah.
what, like how will we learn it better, or what we learn in the end.
Yes.
Then we have also the bus stop activities. We have carousel activities. So
Yes.
what else can we put
Okay.
here?
So yeah. So KWHL has various versions. So we have KWHLQ as well. We have link as well. List down what all I know about it. I link strategy. It is in the they are writing, the I column. They are writing what would they like to inquire about, and they keep on taking notes. So link strategy is there, and the think pair share is there,
Interesting.
and think pair share is there, and the snowball is there. So there are these are the various strategy. And one of the how are we using KWHLQ? It is a strategy which is not only used for taking the prior knowledge, it's a unit long strategy. So have that chart put up in the class and keep on reflecting on the different columns of KWHLQ. So if we are using KWHLQ extensively, it gives a glimpse of entire inquiry. Same goes with this link. So how you're using it, some teachers, what do? They do KWHLQ in one day. They just wrapped it up and keep it in the portfolio. So this is not the right way to use it. So this is one way. And mind mapping is a beautiful
Oh
tool. How you are
yes.
using it. Concept maps is again wonderful. I think I wonder is again uh, PMI,
I
plus
have seen
minus
a
and interesting.
very, I have seen a very beautiful display in a classroom where there is
Yeah,
a string, and this is,
yeah.
let's say, the timeline, and then you make small cards that you can post on that string, and those are the stations of your learning throughout the unit. So, for example, in the beginning, you start with learning like about civilizations. Let's say you learn about
Yeah.
past, present, and future. So you learn about the time stations. And then you learn about, let's say, the prehistoric people, whatever your central idea is. So you put all those major key points, stations across the string, and then at the end you can have your reflection, and you can play some games based on the data and the stations that you have on your string. Or maybe
Yeah, that's
you,
fantastic.
for a self-assessment also, you can have individual timelines. So for example, you can have a chart with lines, and then you can have some labels with your students' names, and you can and then they have to put them where in the line they see themselves understanding. So they will see what they need to learn next. How do they understand it has been inquired, what has been researched during the unit. So there are many strategies that you can have as ongoing,
Yes.
which is
And
very playful for them as well.
yes, and we need to understand what is the purpose of that particular strategy that we are using. I used it as a human graph, as you mentioned, the timeline and the movable, human figures. So we use it as a human graph. We had an understanding zone. So there are three colors, red, blue, green color. So I didn't use it as a traffic light. Those have movable statements that I'm pretty clear about this concept, and I can teach it to my peer.
Mm-hmm.
I have learned this concept, but I need little help, and I'm all blank. So these kind of assessment, the statements were there, and students used to self-assess themselves, and this is something which was ongoing. They could use it in a maths class. I had windshield in my class, and still teachers are using it. So a windshield is there, how many bugs are there? So when students say that many bugs are there, so we can clearly understand that this is something they don't know. So they have some misconception. So taking prior knowledge gives us an opportunity to see the conceptions. What do they already know? And when they know, it is not necessary that they know which is something right. So we got to know that these are the misconceptions, and we get opportunity to tailor to their needs and to plan those learning experiences as per our observation with the prior knowledge assessment. And not only in the unit of inquiry, it is equally important when we are introducing a new concept, place values, or whatever you are introducing. So you need to know where they are, and then only we can say it with justification that yes, we are the one who made them reach somewhere, and they are the one who moved along in the developmental progress. So yes, these are some strategies which we use, and I really enjoy those strategies because I could see the difference,
Mm-hmm.
that yes, it
That's
is
true.
working.
Another thing that we can discuss here is how we can involve parents into the assessment. So assessment, it's not only the planning, it's not only the designing, but it's the implementing, it's the reflection, and
Yes.
the aftermath, or what is the impact that sometimes it takes a lot of time to unveil. So how can we involve parents' reflection, guidance, contribution into the assessment?
Yes. Very good question. Very good question. So, what is, one of the element that stays same in the old PYP and in the enhanced PYP, it is reporting. What has changed? Assessing and recording has become, the monitoring and documenting, but reporting stays there because we need to know where the learners are in their developmental scale. So one thing which we should know, we need to have a very well designed assessment policy which talks about why do we assess, how do we assess, and what are the ways we are using, and what are the ways we use to report. Say, in all my conferences, in all the conferences in this school, there is an element where parents are involved in goal setting, and we view all our conferences as an opportunity to set goals, except the last one where the goal setting is there, but we don't have time to actually work on those goals. And in all the goal setting thing, there are, we mentioned two things: how school is supporting and how you can support. And then teacher discusses the report, and teachers discusses all the things which has been done in the class and what are the ways we can improve. And parents, in collaboration with the student and among themselves, they write, okay, we can do these things to promote learning. So this is one way to involve parents. One thing, have a very well designed assessment policy, have it on your website, and keeping it on the website will not serve the purpose. So make sure when you are doing your parent orientation program, in a break, have the discussion about the assessment, that how PYP assessments are different and what are the ways we are using, what are the tools, because rubric, checklist, continuum is alien thing for we as teachers, and we need to empathize with parents that it is very abstract for them. They don't understand what a rubric is until and unless they are a research based parent, they're doing a little bit of research, so they get an idea. Another thing, uh, portfolio. So when the portfolio making is happening, so what do we do? We have some essential agreements, and then we have a discussion with the student, that what does he or she wants to include in the portfolio and what we as a teacher are proud of. So there are different kinds of portfolio: showcase portfolio or the process focused portfolio. So we have the process focused portfolio. It talks about the growth of student from the
Mhm.
scratch till, so we show the process. So in that, if you are keeping your parents informed, you can ask them like what you think that something which is a milestone in your child's learning. So we are involving parents. And what else we can do, if it's a very very good school where parents are too eager to participate, we can involve them in our collaborative meetings as well, that this is where we up to, this is a central idea, these are the lines of inquiry, and what are the opportunities which you see as success criteria. So while our backward planning, if there are some student and not all parents can come up, so we can select some parent from parent association, or the parents which which they are highly eager, because I have few parents also who are highly eager to understand PYP. I'll tell you one thing. I was doing a program with one of the association in Bangladesh, and one of my parents saw that program, and she told me that the way you explain about equity and equality, I understood the concept. Why don't you organize something for we as parents where you talk about equity and equality in the classroom? So I realized, yes, they are eager to know, they are keen to know, and I immediately jot down this point, that in the next POP, I didn't include equity and equality because I thought that this is something which they need not to know. But when she, emphasized on that particular concept, so I actually, realized that they need to know what is happening, what we are doing, and they may give us suggestions. Right now, how are we involving parents? Because this is we are in such a situation where we cannot go out, and we are not calling guest speakers as extensively we used to call, and people are also keeping too busy, so we are using our parents as guest speakers, our teachers as guest speaker. At present, grade 5 is learning about adolescence, and we utilize our SEN specialists to talk about the behavioral changes and all. We also involve one of the parent who is a psychologist. We also involve one of the parent who is a doctor. Other grade is learning about, what are they learning about? They're learning about physical and social characteristics in kg2, and the teacher says like what resources we can utilize. So this particular, pandemic is giving us opportunity to gain perspective that how better we can use resources. So this is how it is going on, and it is always good to involve learning community. That is the reason PYP has, is focusing on the learning community, because when we all together collaboratively plan for the student's progress, it will work. There's no other go. Like, instead of we being,
Yeah.
separated, compartmentalized, I am blaming, the parents, and parents are blaming me as a teacher, it will not serve the purpose. Instead, we need to gain a perspective that we are together in this. So yes, and you know what has been happening here, there are parents who have very very valid reason to bring in certain changes, so you need to listen to them very patiently what they are trying to say, instead of being in the defensive mode that no, this is what we are doing. So have a growth mindset. So they gave me a, a very valid reason. We were running a synchronous school, and they told me that if, we start our class little later, so the students, because the entire thing has changed, the time routine has changed, students are getting up late, they're sleeping, late. So I listened to them. Then they gave me one more suggestions, that why don't you have some selected response more frequently.
Mm-hmm.
In normal, what do? We use selected response very rarely. We plan open-ended tasks, but now we are using selected responses in a more, extensive manner, because we need to know whether they have that surface knowledge. Then only we can plan for the transferable knowledge or the deeper knowledge. So this is how, we are bringing a bit of changes, and changing, molding, and embracing the change is very important when we are in this, challenging time. So yes, involve parents, and they are actually supportive when they know it, what wonderful things you are doing. Another thing which I want to say, uh, digital portfolio is something which is being very difficult for teachers, especially in a low budget school. So seesaw is a great opportunity. So if, with the parents, making them understand, so when funding become, very very difficult, when it comes to the budgetary requirement, why don't we involve parents? We can tell them that don't you want to monitor your students, your ward's progress? Don't you want to see how is the process going on? And then they realize. So this is what is something which I am planning to, tell them, that how wonderful it is to monitor learning, and what are the benefits of documenting learning. So having seesaw as a tool is great. And even though, you are facing a budget constraint, so involve parents, they may help you out in that. And other thing that I can say, if you're looking for a learning management system, Toddle is great. I have used ManageBack, and I like ManageBack to a certain extent, but yes, it is more for, MYP and DP than for
MYP,
PYP.
I totally
Yes,
agree with you. Yeah.
yeah. And Toddle gives an opportunities to document learning, to monitor learning, and it becomes,
Even
easy
the
for teachers.
planning, even the planning for teachers
Planning is
is, oh my God, it's
planning
so much clearer. Like,
amazing,
right?
clearer. Even you are a new teacher, you have just jumped into the PYP. So instead of me being a pedagogical leader walking you through the
Everything
each
is
step,
there.
Toddle will walk. Yes,
Yes,
everything is there.
exactly. It will
So it
guide you
is,
through the whole
yes,
process of planning, which is
yes,
amazing because you don't
which is
like,
amazing.
as you said, there are many teachers that they're new to the profession, they're new to the
Yes,
PYP, they're jumping from one curriculum to another. So when you have a step-to-step go through guidance, as long, like as you're planning, you have those, like bubbles that they will explain to you. Here we put such
yeah,
things, and here we use this kind of information whatsoever.
yeah,
That was it, guys. So now I'm going to have my own summer break, and I will be having my vacation. So we will renew our meetings in August, when we are going to be returning back to our classrooms, either physical or digital. Okay? So have a lovely summer, nice vacation, and see you later. Bye.